Okay, please find a seat and we'll begin. So I received good feedback this morning that a lot of folks appreciated the deep dives. As I mentioned, each of those breakouts will be accessible on a video archive on the Summit's website. And then also we'll be producing a report from the Summit. So hopefully the smartest things that you all said will make it into that report. I'll mention also at the end of the day, our closing plenary will involve one of the co-facilitators really distilling the discussion in each of the breakout sessions. So as I mentioned this morning, we'll spend the next bit of time together in our second plenary of the day. This morning was focused on the state of play, what's happening with technology and water usage in California. And this afternoon, we're shifting more centrally to the question of what should happen to deploy more technology in California. And to kick off this afternoon, we are very fortunate to be joined by one of the legislative leaders on the topic of water. Senator Bob Wieckowski represents Senate District 10 in California. So if you live in the East Bay, Senator Wieckowski may be your representative. Senator Wieckowski chairs the Environmental Quality Committee of the Senate, which has jurisdiction over water quality, many aspects of the environment, and aspects of drought. He's also a champion for California manufacturing and business development. He's chaired a Made in California effort to expand manufacturing and technology jobs in California. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Senator Wieckowski.
I always get nervous with those introductions, my goodness gracious. No, thank you very much, and I'm pleased to be part of this summit that you're having today on water technology and the California drought. You know, I think with this crowd, this is really the new normal. It's, this crazy weather patterns that we have, that we talk about the fourth year drought, but we should think of ourselves as, faux Israelis or faux Australians, that this is we better get used to it. I don't think there's any other issue that's in the minds of California residents as much as it's water. All the polling shows that, and it's the top concern of everyone. I was listening on the webcast on the Dig Down Deep session with the PUC Commissioner Sandoval and the Energy Commissioner Weisenmiller, and their wonderful graphs. I don't have any graphs to show you, but I thought that one graph with the snow cover and then the water and then the reserve, and you look at it and you think, I should walk around with my constituents and say, do you get it? This is what we're up against. So right, how are we dealing with this fourth year of the drought, or if El Nino becomes an El Nino with no water, the fifth year of the drought? The budget contains an additional $2 billion to reduce the impacts. It also includes some investments. Now, we were talking about, your earlier sessions were talking about those investments into possibly groundwater recharge, and how we have to be smarter. We're not saying enough about groundwater recharge. As the introduction indicated, I'm represent El Viso, so remember when Commissioner Sandoval was talking about that saltwater intrusion as the whole county of Santa Clara subsides? That's my district. Lucky. So we're going to do some things in water conservation, stormwater capture, recycled water, and funds for food and housing assistance for those most affected. I mean, obviously, I think a big game changer is on the water recycling. And again, Santa Clara, because they're forced to do this, has got a project coming up that they're going to take from their tertiary treatment plant, run pipe back into the groundwater, and then filter it again so that people, can I say this here, the poop water to drinking water becomes the reality of the greater San Jose area. Now, the legislature and the governor have also agreed on measures to cut red tape and speed up the approval of the drought relief projects. One of the other jurisdictions that I have, and as the chair of environmental quality, is CEQA reform. So that's, we don't want to eviscerate CEQA, but we understand that there are some streamlining and coordinations that can occur to help out to increase the delivery of water monitoring, so we can, and monitoring is really important to be able to assess how much water we have. I see that the Corps is here, and their mission is to make sure we don't have flooding, right? And some of the technology that's available on the management of the dams, having the dams talk to each other, and predicting the weather patterns, so that we say maybe it's time for us to store, or we don't have to do the releases because the rains are going to stop. All that is technology driven. There's a saying that it's fun, particularly given what we're in, is never let a crisis go to waste. And I believe that the crisis that we have right now should be a catalyst for advancing some of the projects and the ideas that we have, and expanding these new water technologies. Failing to do so will not only worsen the ability to discover new ways to efficiently conserve, but will also betray our history in California as being the leaders in technology, innovation, and leadership. I heard someone say, I was at Yosemite, that the 20th century was the wettest century in California ever. We had more rainfall in that 100 years than ever recorded in history. And we had that 20th century know-how where we invented the front lawn. We built golf courses every possible place we could put them so we could deliver water. We delivered, Pat Brown got the aqueduct, so we brought water to areas. We're on steroids on food production and agriculture. It's a number one industry, and we create a culture that we think, well, we always will have water. That's the expectation. And to say, and for me as a legislator, to tell the public that was the exception. We built this infrastructure with more water than we knew what to do with. Now we have the new norm. So we've got based on that, or part of, I guess, contributing to that was, we have the 8th largest economy, or we'll talk about the 7th largest economy, but it's precisely because we have this culture of innovation, our research institutions, and our access to venture capital that makes California thrive. We are the global leaders in clean energy, high tech, biotech, agriculture, arts and entertainment, and social media. There is no reason why we cannot be the world leader in water tech. I challenge each and every one of you. We can beat the Israelis, we can beat the Singaporeans, we can beat the Australians in water tech, because this is what we do. People expect us to do this. I believe that I'll be participating with the governor and the leadership in our climate change conference and the meeting in Paris. And as we prepare for the road to Paris, I'm doing my part in the climate adaptation. I have a bill on that. But people are looking to us and to all of you for that leadership in solving this problem. Now, back home in the 10th Senate District, which is eastern Alameda County and southeastern Santa Clara County, I'm told, and I guess I believe it, that I have more clean tech jobs in my Senate district than any other Senate district there. It's the home of Tesla. Everyone remembers Solyndra. Now everybody should know that SunPower has moved in there. All those people who lost their jobs got jobs like the next week, because they're engineers. They're the smartest people in the building. And there's other numerous clean tech firms that are thriving in the area today, and they're growing the local economy. I'm thankful for that. They're providing jobs, and they're helping Californians improve their environment and reducing our energy consumptions. So many of the firms in my district are thriving, not only because they have the brilliant, hardworking people, employees, and these cutting-edge products, but also because the state of California is making the investments, a considerable amount of money and time, in implementing and funding a policy framework that promotes the use of clean technology to meet the greenhouse gas reduction goals. And that's precisely, if there's a takeaway here from this conference, is that this is what we have to do in the water arena. I believe that that's the purpose of this summit today, is to create that dialogue on how we can foster the environment that leverages these new water technologies to build more drought resiliency in California. Now, as the chair of the EQ committee, I've also authored, as I intimated, it should be SB, I'm a senator, SB 246, right? And this is going to create the climate adaptation and resiliency program for the states. We're using the Office of Planning and Research as the coordinator for state policy with local and regional governments. There's an element in there that we share information. We have to do a better job on our resiliency program. I mean, I say it often that even if we hit, because it's baseball season, even if we hit a grand slam on reducing greenhouse gases, California produces 1% of the world's greenhouse gases. So if we we'll take De Leon's bill and we reduce it by 80%, now we're at 99.2. On the resiliency side, as you all know, whether we're treating water, we're delivering water, or we're looking at the highway systems, we have to invest hundreds of billions of dollars into our infrastructure to make sure that our economy for our grandkids is safe. So this bill recognizes the need for the coordination and the sharing of expertise, whether it's technical or basic research. To effectively leverage new water technologies, we need a public-private collaboration that capitalizes on our competitive advantages. One of the questions Barry Nelson asked in the previous session was that the utilities basically have to finance about 85–90% of this. You know, the state contributes some money, but most of this is locally financed. My answer to that was another piece of legislation which probably caught everybody's attention, was the 300% tax on abusive users. I think Commissioner Sandoval talked about that it's not 10% or 5%, it's like 10 people that are the abusive users. But after San Juan Capistrano, for using fees is not really maybe a constitutionally protected avenue. So that hated word that a lot of legislators don't want to say to a group of 300 people, taxes, is at least another tool. That's a 2-year bill, but at least I like to throw it out as an idea for how we're going to meet our needs. And so there's several innovative companies that are showing how technology meets it. Some small startup companies like Pacific Airwell are seeking to expand the use of their atmospheric water generators to build drought resiliency. Their water generators pull moisture from the air to create clean drinking water. They're delivering units for home use, but are focusing on large volume users with their scalable models. Now, Pacific Airwell is currently partnering with Central Valley Industries in agriculture, as well as a major university system, to further advance the application and efficiency of its technology. We have Water Smart Soft Water, Water Smart Soft Water, and they produce detailed customers' profiles that enable residents to compare their water use with their neighbors and who have similar profiles to them and recommend the best way to conserve water. I mean, it's unbelievable the advances that in my service area, it's PG&E. When you get your monthly bill and it shows you how you compare to the other people, what's your historic uses, and that data needs to be on every water bill that people get so they understand how they're comparing with their neighbors. Again, in my Senate district, I recognize, I'm going to screw this name up again, as Porifera as my small business of the year. Now they're piloting technology to help food and beverage processors simultaneously increase their wastewater reuse levels and lower their cost of energy. They're the forward osmosis people. We're all familiar with reverse osmosis, which pushes the water through the membrane. They pull the water through the membrane. The California Energy Commission acknowledged this and awarded them $5.7 million. So they're working with Wawona Frozen Food and Los Gatos Tomatoes in the Central Valley on the agriculture side, as well as Kendall Jackson Vineyards and Anheuser-Busch in Northern California to demonstrate the commercial viability. These are just a few examples of the numerous companies, and obviously I walked in, so I saw the other companies that are out there throughout California who are leading in demonstrating to us how water technology can help our residents, the business, and this room full of government agencies in how do we reduce water consumptions. Now, through improved coordination, more research, and the collaboration amongst the public and the private sectors, California, I believe, can become the global leader in the water technology arena. We're the global leaders in clean energy issues because we recognize the serious threat by climate change, and we took the bold action to confront it. Over several years, with the support of the California electorate, we crafted policies and promoted a cleaner California. We're in the business of protecting public health. You know, removing 61 tons of smog-forming pollution every day and simultaneously creating jobs, boosting our gross state product, and leading the nation in a new venture of capital investment is wonderful. There's no reason, again, why we cannot have the same results in the water technology industry. So even as talks of the possible El Nino this fall increases, we can't keep our eye off the ball that we have to use these technologies because it's a cycle. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here. In the long run, California must become more water efficient in the public and the private sectors. We have to adopt to our changing climate. The new norm is the new weird in California weather, and the use of our vast human resources in the 21st century to find solutions to maintain a reliable and steady water supply. Seeing every one of you here today and understanding that it's been oversubscribed gives me optimism to share with my fellow senators as I push to make sure California is a leader here. Thank you for your time. Good luck with the rest of your session. You're on. Oh. And I have people in my district waiting for me. So I'm unfortunately can't stay any longer, but I want to have everybody have a nice weekend, and thank you for letting me be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wojciechowski. My name is Kamyar Gavechi. I am with the Department of Water Resources here in Sacramento. I manage statewide integrated water management. And for the last 15 years, I've been heavily involved in the updates of the state's California Water Plan. As Wade mentioned, what we want this session, afternoon plenary, to do is focus on the way forward. And we've got two presenters from the California Council for Science and Technology, Jeff Dozier and Carl Longley. And then that will be followed by a panel discussion to really vet out what are the barriers that are making the expansion of technology difficult today, and how can we, more importantly, remove those barriers. I think it's a real treat to be asked to do the moderation of this panel. One, it assured me a seat in the auditorium. The other is that over the last, the update 2013 of the water plan, I had the privilege to partner with CCST, California Council for Science and Technology, to really add water science and technology as an important component of the state's water plan. And they're the highlights of the water plan, and two important objectives, one on technology and the other on data and tools, are on DWR's table. I invite you to pick up a copy. The content of what's in the water plan was by and large informed by the work of the CCST. So without further ado, I want to introduce Jeff Dozier. Jeff is the founder of and professor at the Bren School of Environmental Science and Management at UC Santa Barbara. His focus is on snow hydrology, something very important for our state, earth science, remote sensing and information systems. And you might not know that Dr. Dozier was senior project scientist for NASA's Earth Observing System. And we already heard about the importance of maybe getting more satellite information. I also like to introduce Carl Longley. He's an emeritus professor and dean of engineering and the founding director of the California Water Institute at the California State University at Fresno. He's also chair of the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board. So with that, please help me welcome Don and Carl. Excuse me, Jeff, I'm sorry. Too many names.
You know, I grew up with two brothers, and my father used our names interchangeably, so it's okay. Okay, so I'm here to sort of help brief the report that the California Council on Science and Technology did. Okay. So the California Council of Science and Technology is something similar to the role that the National Academies plays for the country. It was created 28 years ago, and the two legislators that did this were Sam Farr, when he was a member of the Assembly, and John Garamendi, when he was a member of the Senate. And as you know, both of those have continued distinguished careers in public service, and in fact, both are now members of Congress. And you know, there's a lot of famous people that are associated with the Seniors Fellows Program on the council. I just joined it in January, and you know, the new guy on the block, they say, well, you've got to be the one who's going to give the briefing. And so what the council does is to examine issues associated with science and technology within the state. And as everybody has noted, including the senator's speech, one of the areas is water. So a year ago, the council produced a report on water, and these are the people who are involved. Some of them are with us in the audience. Carl Longley is going to follow me as a speaker. Bob Wilkinson is in the back, and David Zaldowski, who gave one of the morning plenary sessions. And then Brian Hannigan is at National Renewable Energy Lab, and Sarush Sarushian is a faculty member at UC Irvine. And if one wanted to guess where Sarush would be at any moment, one would say probably on an airplane. So the report was produced as a result of a legislative request. So it was a long effort. There were a lot of workshops that were held around the state, and the idea was that it would be something that it was a sort of a statement of what innovation and technology could do with California water, and it would be a useful tool for people to use to make decisions. It was heavily collaborated with the Department of Water Resources, who, in my experience with people working for the DWR, I particularly work a lot with the snow survey, is they have a lot of really good ideas about how they can do their job better, but they typically don't have much of a budget that they can use to investigate new ways of doing things. So the focus, as we note in the report, is that we need, in doing this, we need to consider the whole water cycle, which is shown in this diagram here, starting on the left, that we get water from the sky in two different forms, some of it in a liquid form, and in California, of course, much of it in a frozen form. And so our first reservoir that we really have is the one that is in the snowpack. And then from this, we can either rainwater directly on the fields to use, but more commonly, we move that water through some sort of a conveyance and distribution system, and then it goes to agriculture and to urban use. And then what's left, of course, either goes back into the groundwater or goes into the ocean or typically goes into some sort of a treatment plant before it continues its journey. Now, California has not been dumb in the use of water. That is, we've seen, and some of the speakers today have documented improvements. And one of the ways that we can see that we've done this is if we look at this graph, which shows the state's GDP per unit of water used. And so the bottom blue line shows that indeed water use per capita has gone down, that state GDP per capita has gone up, and especially state GDP per unit of water used has risen dramatically. But there's still a lot that can be done, and Carl is going to continue the Jack in the Box act here. And
Jeff will return. First of all, the report itself that we put out can be found on the CCSD website. And as Camille mentioned, large parts of this are in the California Water Plan 2013 update, and that was a very important collaboration we had. In fact, three of those folks you saw out there, Bob Wilkinson, David Sodowski, and myself, were the co-chairs of the group that, what do we call that group? The caucus, yes, the caucus that put that report together for DWR. You see our 5 recommendations up here. These are what we're reporting today has been focused somewhat from the original report to pull those parts which pertain particularly to the drought and how we address drought issues. But as part of our effort, we did a tremendous outreach of various focus groups. We had a questionnaire that we used, and it seems that without fail, every time we ask the question, what are the biggest issues that you see? Whether these folks are coming from the private sector, the public sector, or from wherever, it was the fact that we have very poor information management. And so it comes out that develop and implement an integrated water information management system, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but this emerged as really an overriding issue. We talked about also expanding use of monitoring technology and management practices. In other words, everything has to be managed. If you don't have good data, you can't have good management. You need good data for good management, and I think that's a truism that most everybody agrees with, but to get there takes dedication, it takes dollars. Quite frankly, it takes a policy that drives us in that direction. And of course, we talked about improving ag water use efficiency and urban water use efficiency and expanding water reuse and recycling. And I'll talk about those in more detail. This is a short list. There were many other important recommendations in our report and reflected both in the CCST report and in the California Water Plan 2013 update. But in particular, before I proceed, I must point out that we spent considerable time and effort in looking at and reporting on the water energy nexus. Now, as you go on, it just becomes so apparent that we have to consider these issues holistically. We can't take one small segment and say we're going to improve on this, because when you push that bag, it bulges out someplace else. And you have to You have to be holistic in your thinking. It's not just the water energy nexus, it's the water, energy, greenhouse gas, food, add what other factors, and there's a number of them in there that are important. So we have to do the big think on this, and quite frankly, when you start considering the kind of data we need for being able, and go to the next slide, please, or do I have it up here? Now I am challenged. There we go. There we go. When we talk about integrated water management systems, we are talking about water quality, water quantity, how much is being pumped, how much is being put back in the ground, but it's on the water quality sector, what are you doing to the water? We have beneficial uses for water that are very dependent on the quality of that water. So it becomes very important that that becomes part of our information system. You know, I found interesting that the comments about, I think it was about Singapore, that when they had all of this water that they had produced and beginning to integrate some of it into their water supply, and this is I heard the comment, the poop to drinking water comment, but this was wastewater that was processed. And what did they do? They maybe used, I forget the number, I think it was around 20%, eventually goes in the drinking water supply. What happens to the rest? Well, it goes to the semiconductor industry. That's how pure it is. Semiconductor water has to be very pure. So it's very important that we do find ways to monitor effectively, monitor in a transparent manner so this data is available to everybody, that we work towards a single portal that can grab databases from wherever they might be. We're not just water quality. Water quality, we're talking about such things as meteorology, demographics, air pollution, so forth. All of these things that are part of the big picture when we are managing water. So in the near term then, what is it realistic for us to do? Well, first of all, we have to, in preparation of creating such a capability, we should begin to design the system, determine how and where it should be managed, and identify gaps in data, some of which result from not measuring all sources and uses of water. I might point out the not the National Sanitation Foundation. I've been talking about National Sanitation Foundation today insofar as setting standards for equipment. The National Science Foundation, there's too many NSFs out there. The National Science Foundation now has a initiative. It's a big data initiative. There are funding 4 centers, one of them here in the West. When they talk about big data, they talk about big data because they're talking in addition to, they're talking about health, transportation, you go down the line, those areas where we need data to be able to manage systems. And one of those issues from the California perspective we're attempting to establish is the water part of that big data system. So there's a lot of work to be done. We have to find ways to handle big data and make it transparent. Moving on to the next one, I've talked about this. Obviously, we have to measure everything. This slide says expand use of monitoring and measurement practice, including meters and advanced metering infrastructure. Yes, we need to do that. But I'd like to modify the next one. Monitor all groundwater and surface water withdrawals. It has to be holistic. And of course, we need the data so that we can manage well our water resources. Otherwise, we're just running around with a blindfold on. Next one, David Zildowski spoke to this earlier. And it's important that growers use the best management practices possible. I might point out, it was mentioned that I'm also a part of the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Board. We have more ag acres in this valley than about anywhere else. We have a program that first started off about 2003. It's called Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. And we the first only addressed surface water. It now addresses all waters, surface and groundwaters. And as we roll this program out, and there are coalitions, a number of coalitions throughout the Central Valley that represent the growers. But as we roll this program out, we are including a very significant education requirement within that program. And right now, I can't tell you much more than that because just the past couple of days we have been working on a letter that's going to be going out to the growers. But the important part of it is we recognize that for growers to be able to have practices that both benefit their production and at the same time protect groundwater is extremely important. Are these practices going to be difficult for the growers? Probably for the smaller growers. I do know that when I visited the Almond Board put on a tour a couple of years ago that I attended, and they blew my mind away because they were doing the kind of things we thought should happen. And the growers that we visited talk about sensors. They had sensors all over the place. The problem is, it's maybe not a problem, but the point is on many to run ag in many areas, if you're going to run it as we're going to have to in the future, you're going to have good knowledge on how to collect data, operate the databases, process those databases to be able to get the biggest bang out of the buck. Moving on to the next slide. I've been told I have 2 minutes. Hey, I only got 2 more to go. We've already talked about this. Heather Cooley spoke to this morning. But I think on the first bullet there, incentivize low water use and landscapes, and I'd like to add to, and smart irrigation systems, those kind of irrigation systems that can make the use of sensors so that when you do have rain, the sprinklers are turned off automatically and that you are putting on the amount of water you actually need. On the second bullet, the big point there is that we're dealing with old infrastructure in many cases. And old infrastructure is a big problem in the United States. If you go across the infrastructure horizon to transportation and water and so forth, we're talking about trillions of dollars that we're behind. In fact, the American Society of Civil Engineers 2000 report card across the nation on dams, drinking water, and wastewater gave us a grade of D. California does a little better. It got a grade of C, but that's nothing to be proud of. Certainly, we can do better. Next slide, is expanding water recycling reuse. Obviously, we need to greatly increase how we desal water. Desalinization is energy intensive. Finding ways to cut that back is important. And I'll conclude by just adding something for you to think about. One might state that we don't have a water crisis. What we have is an energy crisis. Because if we had abundant, cheap energy, we can desal and produce all the water you want. So it gets back to this water-energy nexus, and something that we have to keep in mind every time we start making management decisions having to deal with water. And with that said, I'll turn it back to Jeff. Okay. Well, what I would like... That's our web address.
Yeah, you can remember the web address.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Carl. So with that, I'd like to invite the panelists to come up, and while they're coming up, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick introduction. We have Don Cameron. He's Vice President and General Manager of Terra Nova Ranch in southwest Fresno, farming approximately 7,200 acres of 25 conventional, organic, and biotech crops. Don is also a member of the California State Board of Food and Agriculture and chairs its Science Advisory Panel. We have Peter Glick, who's co-founder and president of the Pacific Institute for Studies in Development, Environment, and Security in Oakland. He focuses on the Institute on connections between water and human health, hydrologic impacts of climate change, sustainable water use, privatization and globalization, and international conflicts over water resources. Then we have Joe Grindstaff as General Manager of the Inland Empire Utilities Agency. He has over 30 years of experience in water. He's also been the Executive Officer for the Delta Stewardship Council, the Executive Officer for the California Bay Delta Authority, and Deputy Secretary for Water Policy for Natural Resource Agency. And then we have Tamin Peckett. He is founder and director of Banyan Water, a leading software and data analytics business. He's also co-founder and chair of Imagine H2O, the largest global water business accelerator. Mr. Tamin advises several of the world's largest investment firms on water and energy, and he co-authored the book Water Tech, A Guide to Investment, Innovation, and Business Opportunities in the Water Sector. So what we're going to do is two rounds, question and responses. So first one is, what are the current barriers to expanded deployment of successful technologies, and what opportunities are there to improve their implementation? And with that, Don.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. You know, when we talked about priorities that we need in agriculture, we've talked earlier about how we all need high efficient irrigation systems. And we've talked that we do have, really, we have the tools out there, that it's just been a problem with implementation and getting, I guess, getting everybody on board. We spoke earlier at the meeting earlier today about some of the pitfalls that we run into in dealing with some of the high efficiency irrigation systems that we do have. And I made a comment earlier that, you know, the implementation has been driven for two reasons. One has been high cost water. And I stated that earlier, when we do have low cost water, you see a slower implementation for delivering drip systems or microsprinkler systems onto the crops there. But one of the advantages that we do see is increased yield with many of the crops that do have microsprinkler or berry drip irrigation systems. So I guess I'm not advocating higher water costs, but you do see in some of the districts, as in Westlands, as opposed to an east side delivery system, you see much faster implementation of water saving technologies, from drip systems to monitoring and really conservation of water. I feel that, you know, one of our big problems is we put systems in and we don't follow through with either maintenance of the systems, because typically a grower will put a drip system in, essentially hear the switch, hit the switch, and that's about it. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement with just general overall maintenance of the systems that are already in, and better education of the growers that do put them in. Also, irrigation scheduling, the same thing. Many growers aren't familiar with the technology. They're given a system, and they're expected to operate it efficiently. I was going to bring a photo. I've got a neighbor who has a micro sprinkler system in an almond orchard, and it looks like he's flood irrigating. There's so much water. So it's a matter of the best use of the system you have and knowing how to operate it properly. You know, we talk about all of the automation. I mean, my goal on our farm would be to have the whole farm under Wi-Fi, to where everything was interconnected. If that's my dream. If I could have water meters that would report if I could have pressures, if I could have moisture sensors, all go to a central program and be integrated in one spot. But simplified, I know that those are two opposite terms, but we need technology, but we need it interfaced at a level that is fairly simple for the people that we have operating these systems to understand. I get graphs all the time. I can flip my phone on, my computer on, see what the moisture level is from 0 to 5 feet in my almond orchard, walnut orchard, tomato field. But to get that information to the guy that's actually out there making the decisions is really a difficult task. One other thing is, you need to have your feet on the ground. The technology is great, but you need to follow through. You need to have people out there actually knowing what's going on. Maybe I'll just leave it at that and
You'll get another chance.
I'm sure. Thanks.
Okay, Peter.
Thank you, Camille. It's great to be here. This is sort of a remarkable audience. There's a lot of water brain power in the room, and it's great to see people and to listen to the conversations. So I'm glad we're doing this in two pieces, and then we'll come back to priorities and solutions after we talk about barriers. But let me talk about barriers in this first round. But before I do that, just so you know where I'm coming from, I think we're not going to solve the water problem without technology. But I think we're not going to solve the water problem with just technology. And I think that's important to remember, and other speakers have made that point. But technology is a piece of this puzzle. It's a really important piece of the puzzle, but it's one piece of the puzzle. I also would note that there's no shortage of good ideas. I get, like many of you, I'm sure, I have files and files of emails and inventions and things that people have thought of that will solve the water problem, if only it was implemented. Some of those are really good ideas. Some of them maybe less so, but there's no shortage of good ideas. And the stuff that we see out there is a good example of a lot of those. Okay, so barriers, 5 of them. I'm going to describe 5 of them. The first is practicality and management. We have an existing system. We have existing infrastructure, and it's one thing to think about a piece of technology that is brilliant that will solve the problem, but integrating it with the existing system or having to modify a very complicated existing system and infrastructure in order to adopt this new technology is sometimes a challenge. And Don made this comment about the difficulty of getting some good ideas out there actually into the field. So practicality and management is a barrier. You might want drip irrigation. We know that drip irrigation has enormous advantages under certain kinds of conditions, but if you don't have a pressurized water system to begin with, that's a problem. If you have it, but you don't have a measurement system, that's a problem. So it's not just drip, it's drip in an integrated complex system. The second barrier is culture and experience. We have a water rights situation and system that's developed over 150 years or so. We do what we know how to do. Culture is a problem sometimes in changing the way we do things. If you want to do something differently, you run up against somebody who has always done something some way and knows how to do it that way and doesn't know how to do it a different way or isn't sure how to learn about how to do it a different way. Culture is an important part of the challenge that we face statewide. The third is money, and there are a lot of different pieces to this puzzle. Financing mechanisms, the price of water, the cost and value of water, tools for getting grants out there or low interest loans, innovative financing. So the money piece of this is a barrier often. And again, some previous speakers have mentioned that. The fourth is lack of information and data. The senator made some comments about an integrated data system. The CCST report talked about as a top priority the need for an integrated data system. We don't collect the data we need to manage California's water adequately. We don't manage the data we already have. It's not transparent. I think that's well understood. We say it over and over again. I'm a little frustrated by both the understanding that we have a lack of data and the need for more data, and yet the failure to implement systems to get more data and to manage more data. We ought to put more effort into that. And the last barrier is public opinion. Public opinion is complicated. How do people feel about wastewater? We might want to use more wastewater, and there are technologies for that at the local level, the regional level, the statewide level, but how do people feel about, what's the public opinion about that has been a barrier. Public opinion about price of water and cost. Public opinion about groundwater and the way we've always managed groundwater. There are certain people who benefit from the failure to manage groundwater. That's just a reality. And getting public opinion and local opinion in sync on those issues is important. Water rights. Public opinion about water rights is a complicated one. Public opinion about lawns. Again, this came up a little bit this morning. We've thought forever that lawns are that's a nice household outdoor landscape. Public opinion about lawns is changing, as some of us argue it ought to change, but that's a slow process. And in general, integrating the public opinion problem into the technology adoption problem is the fifth of those barriers. And I'll stop there at 0 time. Thank you.
I agree with everything that Peter just said, but I want to kind of add one.
Are we recording this?
It's okay. I want to add one other thing. For me, one of the fundamental things that we lack is a driver that forces us to get out of our comfort zone and look for something different. And the drought is providing that driver now. But for years and years, we haven't had that driver. And once you get it, then it takes some time to rev up and really say, oh, I really want to do that. So for us, for example, I think we've always thought, well, we're trying to do all we can to be efficient. But because of the drought, we went out, we hired a couple of companies, some that are out here, On the Earth and some others that have done an outstanding job for a relatively small amount of money to actually quantify how much water we in our region are using. And it turns out if we just met the standards that were in place before for water use efficiency, you know, the standard that you're supposed to use 0.8 times the evapotranspiration rate, we wouldn't have to change the landscape at all. We just have to manage it right, and we'd meet the governor's target for reducing water use. We just haven't done that. And there hasn't been a driver that's forced us as a community to change what we're doing. For me, that driver is the most important thing. We will find ways to come up with money. We certainly will deal with public opinion. I mean, we deal with all these other issues, but without some forcing agent, we're not likely to actually change and implement the new technologies that are out there that will make great improvements in data and how we do things, but even things, treatment technologies. I hope I'm not going to run long on this, but I'll give you an example. We use ion exchange now to remove nitrate and other things in our water. But if we change that technology and go to one that doesn't generate brine waste, we could potentially save a huge amount of water. There are technologies out there. We just haven't pushed through and actually changed that technology to something that would be more efficient, frankly, in the long run, cheaper and easier to use, because we're kind of stuck in the rut. And I think that's human. We work in a conservative industry. It's the nature of the water business to make big long-term investments and to not jump at the newest thing just because it's there. But there are opportunities all around us to do things better. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here and for having Imagine H2O be part of this. Appreciate it, Wade, and everyone else who's put this event on. So how many people in the room make a living in the water industry in one form or another? So this is, I think, a safe place to say this, but I'm going to focus in on Peter's third point on money. It's okay for people to make money delivering good water technology solutions to customers who need them. And there's this fear and avoidance of certain words like selling, having customers buy something. But ultimately, when we're talking about an industry that has lots of good solutions and we're struggling to get them implemented or disseminated or adopted, we just mean we need to help companies innovate and get customers to buy their solutions. And Imagine H2O has looked at 450 companies that have come through our program in the last 5 or 6 years. We have 60 that we help accelerate and get to market. And we've learned some lessons from watching what's happened there. And in terms of barriers, it starts with people. You need human capital. You need people to innovate. How do you get a great engineer to focus on water instead of a mobile application? There has to be an awareness of the opportunity for that person, or the best people won't flock to this opportunity. Once you get good people, you need some money and support. Water is a $625 billion global industry, and it's about 1% of venture capital. The senator talked a little bit about California's opportunity to lead in water technology. It hasn't moved a whole lot. We've seen better companies, and we've seen companies do increasingly well. And I think that there's a myth that water startups tend to not be good businesses, which empirically is not true. I'm on the board of a company called Lux Research that did a comparison study of 3,700 technology-focused businesses in different industries, and water technology companies tend to outperform in terms of profitability over 10 and 15-year time horizons. So they're good businesses. But in the end, you need customers to buy from them. And we have some barriers in purchasing that I think we can do a lot better at alleviating. Right now, there aren't a lot of incentives for customers, either in the public or private sector, to go out on a limb, as Joe said, and to take a risk and to buy something new. There is a culture of buying what they bought last year or not risking their jobs. And what's interesting to me, working in Silicon Valley and having been a venture capitalist across other industries, is that most of the technologies we're talking about in water have been around longer and are far more proven than technologies that we'd be talking about in other industries. There are a lot more reference points for customers to go to say, this isn't such a big risk than one might expect. And I think as we start to push things like the drought, increase mandates, have better pricing structures, et cetera, what you'll see is it wasn't such a big risk that you bought that water technology product or service. It's turned out pretty well, just as Joe was referring to in his district. And that will create a virtuous cycle from what has been a little bit of a vicious cycle in terms of barriers to adoption of water technology.
Thank you. So the second question I'd like the panelists to address is, how can state government, water agencies, and other stakeholders support further water technology deployment? Don?
I've been involved with the SWEEP program, which is the State of California program for the Water Efficiency and Greenhouse Gas Reduction Program for this past year. It's been the first time that we've combined water saving conservation with greenhouse gas reduction for the state, and incentivized growers to switch to drip irrigation, variable frequency drive motors, and other water conservation areas. I think that that program has been a really excellent program. For the first year, it was over-solicited. It was a $10 million grant, and it was over-solicited by $34 million last year. So there'll be an additional, the second year just closed about a week ago. And I think, like I say, that's an excellent program for growers to take advantage of. We also see funding from PG&E for energy reduction programs, where we've got variable frequency drive motors. NRCS is also another source. It's a long, arduous program to get accepted for, but there's also funding there. I think that putting the carrot out there in front of a grower is going to be much more effective in getting water conservation across. Having to regulate it down to at the grower level is going to be difficult. We've seen the same advantages in the Air Board program. with air reduction programs and the tractors that have been replaced throughout the San Joaquin Valley. So I think growers are open for change. I think it's many times it's a financial reason that doesn't allow them to pursue new technology. If you're worried about making your mortgage payment on a farm, you have a much harder time in wanting to put in a irrigation conservation system.
So partly related to the way I think about barriers, the way I think about priorities for solutions is the things that overcome those barriers. And I think about education and communications. So if we think about a problem being public opinion, education and communication is really key. And there's around the drought, there's been a lot of really innovative communications going on as people have tried to figure out how to address water challenges with different audiences. And I think that's a key strategy. The money problem produces some thoughts about money solutions and innovative financing, some of the things Tammin was talking about, market expansion, subsidies, rebates. There are different tools for different pieces of this puzzle. One of the ways that we got more efficient appliances out there was water utilities started offering rebates. So there are financial incentives as a tool. Grants, the state bond money, some of that's grants, some of it's low interest loans or different kinds of loans. There are a whole set of financial tools, and Tammin is probably better than me at describing a lot of them. But we have to get better at figuring out how to overcome the financial barriers that will help people implement the technologies that improve their water use. Regulations. Smart regulations are smart. Not smart regulations are problematic, and people rail against them. But without smart regulations, we're missing an important tool. And appliance efficiency standards is a good example of that. And Heather's description this morning about the importance of toilet efficiency standards after 1980 at substantially reducing the amount of water that California uses for toilets is not a mundane example. That's a huge amount of water. And we have appliance efficiency standards for shower heads and for dishwashers and in the commercial sector. And those standards are really influential. We had state standards and then we have national standards because California drives the national conversation on this historically. Building codes, another regulation. Building codes, retrofit on resale possibilities for residential homes. There are lots of regulations that will help us push ahead with the adoption of some of those technologies out there that are not moving as fast as we would like. Information and data. Obviously, I believe a strong priority should be collecting comprehensive information on water use in particular, but a lot of other things. Figuring out how to share that data, how to manage that data in an open source way, but also how to use the data. And Don gave a really good example of he can pull up remarkable data on his cell phone, but if he can't get that data to the guy who's managing the delivery of water in the field, it's nice to have it on his phone, but it's not as useful. So collect it, manage it, and figure out how best to use it. Finally, we have to stimulate the demand for new technology. And again, Tammin mentioned this, but there's a frustration out there. If you've talked to each of those people who have some technology that they think really solves a piece of their puzzle, ask them what the barriers are and how frustrated they are about the lack of demand for what they see as a really effective solution to even a small piece of the challenge. And you'll get some insightful comments. Finally, I think there's a scale issue here and a scope issue. And by scale, I mean, how do we take what works and expand it? How do we stimulate that demand so that it's not just applicable in one watershed or one water utility, but get the stuff that works adopted really broadly, because that's the way you get effective changes to the state's water use. So that's a scale problem. Somebody talked about consolidating water agencies. That's sort of a scale question, and I'm not going to weigh in on whether that's a good or a bad idea, but it's an interesting conversation to have. But then the scope issue is energy and water and climate change and food together. You get advantages of integrating across issues. The energy water nexus conversation that we had this morning, that Chairman Weisenmiller helped coordinate, is a good example of that. We now know that there are things that we want to do in the energy world that will greatly influence water demand, and vice versa on the water side that will influence energy demand and greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a scope issue, and we're really bad at cutting across institutions designed for energy over here and water over here and food over there and climate over there. But if we can cross those barriers and get the economies of scope, then I think that that's an enormous step forward. Thank you.
I think we have great opportunities to go beyond the current crisis and think about other things that we can do that will actually be innovative and make our business better as we move ahead. So I'm just going to raise a couple of examples. I don't know, I started my career in a lab, and I used to run a BOD test. You know, we still do BOD tests today. Our agency's getting ready this next year to start construction on a $20 million laboratory, and we've made improvements, but we haven't made the transformational improvements that we could make that would make testing water much easier to do, much quicker, and less costly, and might actually provide information that would protect the public health better as we move ahead. And as we look ahead, that's a challenge. So one of the things I asked our lab manager when we were talking about, okay, do we really need to build this lab? Well, are we going to be going to a lab on a chip in the future? Are we going to change the fundamentals that we have just always assumed are going to be there because the world is changing? I think we have an opportunity to do that. We've talked a lot about data here today, and when I was working on Delta issues and talking with the scientists there, they were big proponents of big data, actually gathering all of the data that you could and trying to help sort through things and figure it out and understand what was going on. I think we have great opportunities. We actually collect less data today about flows and streams because over the years, the last 15 years, USGS has been getting less funding from Congress and been spending less money on flow stations. We can do better as an industry, and we can do it cheaper. We can find ways to be better, and we have opportunities like that. I can't leave out energy because we have opportunities to do things in using energy. So we're going to our board in the next, it's either August or September, and we're going to talk about should we have a net negative carbon objective for the agency, and if so, when should we set that goal? How soon can we achieve it? We've done a lot of things. We've done solar, we've done wind, we've got a fuel cell, we've done an awful lot of things, but we still have a significant carbon footprint. What is it that we as an agency can do in the future? That's really important. And as people are thinking about the future for the industry, I think we have to think about those issues. I think we have to think about biotechnology. Are we going to change and start measuring viruses and bacteria that are in our water and in our wastewater in ways that we've never conceived in the past? And is that going to change the regulations? That there's a component that falls on us as agencies. There's a component that falls on the state board and the regulators to be innovating in those areas and figuring out funding the fundamental research and then helping develop standards that we can use that will be easier and maybe more effective than the old style tests that were developed in the 1850s. So I think there are great opportunities, and I look forward to the next few years.
So when I think about what we should do now, the first thing that I go back to is people. Who is answering that question? And there are a lot of people who know a lot about not just what good ideas are to increase the adoption of water technology, but what's politically viable? And our proposed solution at Imagine H2O is we're going to launch this year a policy program very similar to what we've done in business for the past 6 years to open source that question to people who have experience in water policy and good ideas, and their submissions will be judged by experts, not just on how good the idea is in terms of impact, but whether it's actually politically feasible. Because when you go to a number of water events, you start to hear a lot of agreement from professionals in the industry about what we should do, and sometimes not a lot of information about what we actually can accomplish, what's feasible given different stakeholder interests and the political climate. So the first thing I think we should do is open source that question, and Imagine H2O is going to try to do that this year. The second thing that I think about here is, well, incentives. And we talked a little bit about that for customers. I think we've all touched on that. But pricing signals, it's not just how much you're paying, but the structure on which you're paying if you're a customer in water. And there are a lot of improvements to be made to give signals to customers that are incentives to get them to adopt water technology. That can be different ways of tiering rates, that can be mandates, that can be just something similar to what we've seen in energy to encourage a switch in production from traditional centralized systems to more decentralized systems for treatment. So I think incentives is an area where the state and other actors can have a lot of impact in encouraging the adoption of innovation. And then the last thing I think that we should be cognizant of is in the water industry there is perennial reinvention of the wheel. And there's a reason for that, which is water as a commercial market is hyper-local. Lots of people come up with innovations in their town that they sell to the people that they know, and they can make a good living off of that, but it's hard to disseminate that broadly in a go-to-market approach. That takes money, that takes awareness, and so you have a very fragmented system. And if you look hard enough in water, you will probably find that whatever great idea you have, someone else has already had. And I think there's a real temptation when we start thinking about how to govern and what policy initiatives to promote to encourage the adoption of water technology to reinvent the wheel. There are a number of organizations that can be leveraged with support from state and local government in California that can do most of what we would like accomplished. So get good people involved, focus on incentives, try to avoid reinventing the wheel.
So we actually have some extra time. So what I'd like to do is to give each panelist an opportunity, having heard everyone's recommendations, some final thoughts. If you could each take a couple of minutes. One thing I might ask you to think about, and it goes back to this idea that it's not that there's a lack of technology, but how do we get it deployed? And how might water governance and institutional setting be improved or changed to actually help promote or expand the implementation of existing technologies? So Don.
Thank you. There's over 300 crops in California, and there's so many microclimates and growing areas within the state that we're going to find that one solution isn't going to fit everywhere. I mean, on our own farm, we use buried drip irrigation in row crops. We use sprinklers for carrots. We use above ground drip for trees and vines. And that's just within our own small area. So I think you're going to have to look hard for each area is going to have its maybe a little different solution. One other comment about the some really small technology. Everybody, the goal is to be more efficient with irrigation, drip irrigation, micro sprinklers. I guess what I would say is keep your legacy system in place. There's nothing wrong with flood irrigating when you have excess water, because that's replenishing your groundwater supplies in many areas. And they've relied on that for many years. I think you can't overestimate the value that does bring to recharging an area. And on another note, we're talking about implementation of what government can and can't do, and just an analogy, for years we wanted to put in a solar PV system, but because the regulations didn't allow us to congregate our loads, we couldn't do it. We were told we had to put a system at each location, each well, which financially doesn't work. But once we were able to bring all the wells together, create one load, we put a 1 megawatt system in. So government regulations can play a pivotal role in implementing new technology. I'm not sure where it's going to fit in on irrigation systems and on water conservation, but I'm sure that there'll be a place down the road. Thank you.
Road. So just a couple of ideas. I would be remiss if I didn't at least throw this on the table, that we need Prop 218 reform. Senator's gone. Anyway, I'll throw that on the table. I think we need Prop 218 reform. I think there also ought to be a conversation about a state charge on water, a public goods charge. I don't know what you want to call it. I don't really care what you call it, but this would partly address the financing question. Some of this money could be used for technology innovation and for reducing barriers, and it's been used successfully in the energy area. And if you look at your cell phone bill, which none of you look at anymore because you get it electronically and God knows what they're putting on your bill, there are all sorts of little charges on there that people accept, and public acceptance is an issue, but I think it's a possibility, and I think it's an important tool we ought to be discussing. Finally, just in general, I think success stories are really useful and valuable. Again, other people have said this. There are really innovative things going on statewide in every sector. And Don's examples with his direct experience on farm, their experiences in the urban area, their experiences in ecosystem restoration, there are things that work, and there are ways that technology feeds into that. And if we understand what works and why it works, we have a chance to address this issue of scale that I talked about and scale things up. And so I love success stories. I think we ought to compile them and spread them and figure out, this is part of the public communications issue also. But I think the more we know about what works, the more likely other people are to adopt it.
I wish I knew all of the things that I know now. I wish I knew that back 10 years and 20 years ago when I was first managing a retail agency and then a regional agency and then coming to the state. Seems to me that one of the things we haven't thought about as clearly is what are all of the things that we want to do strategically as a state, as an industry, and there's no clear vision. We tend to be reactive. And so from my perspective, it would be really good if, and I don't know that you do it by having one meeting or one group that drafts something, but I think if there's a concerted effort amongst our community, and we're all part of a larger community, we can come together and we'll come together around a common vision about what we have to do. I think the drought is driving everyone to say we have to be much more efficient, and that's probably been a long time coming. I think that's a common understanding amongst everybody. There are probably other things that ought to be part of that vision. In my mind, I would say, well, we have too many water agencies. I don't know how we change that, but we have thousands of permitted agencies in the state, and that doesn't seem like that's a way for things to work. I'm sure there's not agreement today about that changing or how that would change. But if there were some kind of common vision about where we're going and some common drivers, I think that would help us all focus on what we need to do, both technology-wise and institutionally, to make improvements.
My last word would be a positive message that I think water is a great opportunity, and I think that we are going to make dramatic improvements in how we're managing it. My wife and I have been trying to get my in-laws to move to California from Minnesota, and my mother-in-law is afraid of the water problem, and I keep telling her, don't worry, it's going to be okay. And in all seriousness, I think that we have so many levers. Thank you, Peter. It's wise advice. I think that we have so many levers that we can pull to make improvements that we are going to see continual improvement. And just looking around the room, I know a number of water entrepreneurs in this room who have built amazing companies and have amazing products and services. And frankly, versus energy or other industries, they get no support. On a comparative basis, they don't even get a 5-finger boost, no less a 10-finger boost. And if we can just give them 5 fingers at least, I think that a lot of technology solutions will become deployed more broadly and will be part, although not all, of ensuring a better water future in California.
Thank you. So you beat me to the punch. So with that, I think this was a very productive session. What I'd like to do is to invite you to go to the next 3 breakout sessions that follow after a 15-minute break. And just so you know, the residential and commercial water use session will be right here in this room, Byron Scher. And then the fostering innovation, commercializing water technology, economic development opportunities will be in the Sierra room around the stairs. And then finally, there'll be the managing natural systems, water technology for improved watersheds and ecosystem management in the room next door, coastal hearing room. So with that, please join me in appreciating and thanking the speakers of this session.
Thank you very much.